Aloha, friends, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Embodied Healing Self. So I am sitting here today with Dr. Tom Incledon from Scottsdale, Arizona. He is a world-renowned expert in human health and performance. He is the founder and chief scientific officer of Causenta Wellness Center in Scottsdale, Arizona, where he is pioneering a new database approach to cancer treatment that combines traditional and non-conventional practices. Dr. Tom has revolutionized the way over 40,000 people have achieved their health and performance goals to date. He holds multiple degrees in nutrition, kinesiology. He is a PhD in physiology, and he's also a member of 30 plus scientific organizations. He's also trained at the Olympic level in weightlifting. So I'm super excited to share this guest with you today. Welcome, Dr. Tom. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. That was a really nice intro. Now I feel like I better say something intelligent.
Yeah, I think it's always important to be reminded of the work and the experience that has gotten us to where we are. So thank you for all of the commitments that you've made to create something in the world that is really on the leading edge of health and wellness. I'm super excited and honored to share all of your work here today with my listeners.
Oh, cool.
So what really grabbed me about Dr. Tom was the idea of revolutionary health and wellness, because that is really the space that I live in. And as I was doing my research and my homework on Dr. Tom to bring him on the show, I was really drawn to the understanding of the many different layers of our health and well-being. And, not just looking at the physical body or what's happening there, but also the mindset and the emotional piece of it and the spiritual piece, and just really allowing yourself or ourselves to look at patients as a whole and opening up this gateway to what is possible when it comes to healing different things that people experience in their life. And I know that you, Dr. Tom, had your own healing journey that helps to drive the passion in the work that you do. And I just want to invite you to just share a little bit about that moment in time where there was a shift in your health and wellness, and it created this passion and this drive to do the work that you do.
Okay. So I was in early years of college at Penn State, went to a barbecue, and shortly after a barbecue, I got really sick. And so my belief now is that I got some sort of parasite infection, but I don't know that. And at the time, they wouldn't test me for parasites or anything. So basically, I was training for the Olympics and Olympic weightlifting. I was really strong, very fit. I was in a weight class sport, so my weight was tightly regulated and monitored, because if I got too heavy, I had to compete in a different weight class, and I may not qualify for competition. So one day I lost, let's say, I went to a barbecue on Sunday. By Monday, I lost 10 pounds. I felt really off, and I couldn't stop going to the bathroom. And so I wind up going to the hospital, and they check my blood pressure, check my pulse. They say, everything's fine. This will pass. I'm like, you're checking the wrong parts of my anatomy here. This is not where my problems are. So they discharge me. Next day, I lose another 10 pounds. So I've lost 20 pounds in 2 days, go back to the same place. And the only reason why I went to this place is because it was the local university hospital on campus. It was kind of far to go anywhere else. So same sort of outcome. They check my blood pressure, check my pulse, everything's fine, discharge me. The third day, I lose consciousness and I faint, and now an ambulance is taking me to the same hospital. And now they go, hey, your blood pressure is low. And I'm like, look, I've lost 25 to 30 pounds in 3 days. And you're checking my blood pressure and heart rate. I'm telling you, I can't stop going to the bathroom. Can you run some stool tests or something? And so they run some tests, and they come back and they go, everything's negative. So then I asked, well, what did you test for? And they looked at me like I was an alien because they asked an intelligent question. And I'm like, well, how do you know everything was negative if you don't know what you tested? That doesn't make any sense to me. And then How many things did you test for? So let's just say they tested for 5 things. I'm like, there's got to be more than 5 organisms out there. So if you only test for 5, what if I had number 100 on the all-time popularity chart? You didn't even look for it. So how would you know if I have it or not? So the nurses were upset with me. So they bring in a doc. I tell the doc, look, you guys are testing stuff that I don't have, and you're not looking for what I do have. There's something in me I didn't have before. And what I think is I have some sort of parasite, and is there some sort of broad spectrum antimicrobial agent you could use to kill this thing off? Because I don't want to keep disintegrating and everybody's checking my blood pressure and heart rate. And so then he said, no, I'm worried about antibiotic resistance. I don't want to prescribe anything for you. I said, well, that's a flawed approach because I'm dying right now and you're worried about 10 years from now. If I don't make it through today, I don't get to see 10 years. So I'm not worried about antimicrobial resistance. So how about you find another doctor for me so I can find someone that's going to see my way of thinking. So they got another doc for me. I told that doc, look, I'm not worried about what's going to happen in 10 years. I'm worried about living today. So he then said, makes sense to me, wrote me a prescription for something. I don't remember what it was now. And then 2 hours later, I was fine, never had that issue again. But it took, 3.5 days. It took me going by ambulance to a hospital, dealing with, it was set me back in my training dramatically. It took a long time to kind of recover from that. It's a long time, like weeks, And so that was one incident. What I learned from this is that health has nothing to do with optimal biology. I was at a lab at Penn State where I had some of the brightest minds in the world in exercise science. We were publishing the first studies on men and women strength training. We were doing research on men over 90. We were doing all these different things. You got to remember in the 80s, that was a time when a social cultural climate in the United States is women were told it's not ladylike to sweat. When we're told, well, you're the weaker sex and you'll never be as strong as a man. And as ridiculous as that stuff sounds today, people actually thought that way. They would say that out loud, I'm not talking about in a third world country. I'm talking about the United States, okay? So this is really shocking, but it just shows you how, we always have a lot of room to grow, in all these different ways. And so when we came out and said, we're going to do strength training for women, and we're going to take average women and make them strong and average men, everybody thought we were quacks. Like, oh, you guys are quacks. There's no way a woman can be stronger than a man. Well, 6 months later, all the women are stronger than all the men. And everybody goes, you guys are geniuses. How did you know? Like, well, if you take competent exercise professionals and you use their expertise to train average people, doesn't matter if they're a man or a woman, they get substantially stronger. We had people coming in that could barely bench 100 pounds, and when we were done, they're benching 300 pounds because we had people work with their biomechanics. We had people working with their pacing and rhythm of lifting, things that can improve your ability to demonstrate force or improve your force output much better. So that was my one experience early on. I was in Penn State when this stuff happened. Later on, I was then at the University of Miami, and I was competing in a World's Strongest Man type competition. So around a bunch of big, strong guys, I'm in first place, and I'm flipping a 1,200-pound tire on wet grass. And I slipped, and the tire came at me sideways, and it ripped my tibia and fibula out of my right knee. So that was probably more devastating than the GI issues I had earlier on. GI issues, I really felt like I'll get through this at some point. I was just unhappy with the healthcare system I was exposed to. Later on, when I got hurt, that injury was so traumatic. Bunches of doctors said there's nothing that could be done. I wound up seeing a doctor friend of mine in Florida, and that doctor was Robert Bayless, and this was in around Fort Lauderdale area. And he said, man, your knee's really jacked up. So I said, look, just do the best you can, put me back together, and I'll take it from here. And so afterwards I said, look, can you give me a word you did the best you could? He said, yeah. I said, all right, I'm cool with that. Let's go forward. So I then went on a journey, and I brought in doctors from around the world to try different experimental procedures on my knee. And it took about 2 years. And I wound up, not only was I able to walk right again and stuff like that, I didn't have a wheelchair, I didn't have crutches anymore. I actually won turn a competition, and I won everything I competed in pretty much. I set records at the state level, national level, set some world records. So this was with a knee joint that everybody said, had to be replaced. Nothing could be done. So I literally have over 100 doctors telling me something that I could absolutely say they were all wrong. And so what that shared with me is that if I accept the way other people are thinking and approaching life, the best I could hope for is what they're saying. But we all should know at this point in our lives that there's so much potential out there. There's no way one human being can clearly understand what's out there waiting for them. So we have to be willing to explore our options and see what's going on. But hopefully in some sort of controlled way, we're actually moving forward, right? Because to just go and do a lot of effort, but go in circles or run in place, that doesn't produce results. So you can't randomly try stuff. And so what I learned from those two experiences, one is too many people read stuff on the internet and accept that as gospel. The internet has got a background that is designed to drive revenue and sales. It is not designed around optimal biology. Unfortunately, most people read something on the internet and accept it as truth, and they don't consider they could be totally derailed from going towards the direction they actually need to go. And we talk about patient experiences and stuff later on in the podcast. I'll share with you just the number of stupid things I've seen people do that basically kill themselves without really being aware of it. It's like they're paying to die, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that story with me. I didn't know the full story, and how I want to bring the listeners in is what I want to open up is that was your story. Mm-hmm. And although the listener may not be able to relate specifically to the journey or the experiences through weightlifting at the level that you were as an athlete and through your GI experience, we may have some other experience. And there's that part of it where our perception of the experience creates the reality. And where you said, kind of creating our own belief system about what's possible, right? Like I heard you say the words, what you learned was through that experience that you were being told certain things and you were asking questions. You were asking questions about, can you do this? What is possible? Knowing what was interested in what was best for your body, and not accepting, I'm going to use the word limiting belief in this case, not accepting another person's perceived limiting belief of your body. You chose not to accept that. And that to me, like when you said that was where I was like, yes, because that is like the golden nugget, I think, in what you just said, is that if we could just somehow show people, if we could get them to believe in their body, that they can create their own belief system about their own body. That's what the embodied healing self is about. Mm-hmm. Not to be limited by, because that particular, any doctor, and by the way, we are completely supportive of all practices of medicine in this conversation. But just knowing that anytime we have a conversation with somebody, they are coming into it with their perception and their experiences. Mm-hmm. I had a similar experience with my near-death experience when my daughter was born. It was just like, he came in very strong because he had just lost a patient, and this is in Arizona, with the same thing that I had, which was HELLP syndrome. And so he came in with this is going to happen to you, right? So I say that to say that this is where the empowerment comes from. The empowerment of our own, knowing our own belief system and making our own decisions for what works for us. And you busted through those limiting beliefs and you still performed at a level even after a traumatic injury. And so I really want to thank you for sharing that story with the listeners, and just invite the listeners to really reach into the idea that anything and everything is possible should we choose to walk down that path and seek more answers. And I heard you say a couple of things. One is, I believe that there's an opportunity for some discernment whenever we're on this path of health and wellness. And what I mean by that is, you mentioned that the internet has a lot of information. And I do think that although we are encouraging and empowering people to know that healing is possible, healing that people don't think is possible might be possible, that there is also there's also this, because of the world we live in with access to technology and information that we didn't have in the 80s or the 90s, that there may be a lot of listeners on here, and I was one of them, including myself at the very beginning, that become their own self-prescribed internet doctors, and they think that they can get the answers from the internet. And there's really this balance of, yes, you can sort of start to learn about possibilities, but there is also a time where you need support. And so what I noticed about Causenta Wellness is that it is a place where, you sort of said, it's a one-stop shop. It's a place where people come, I'm imagining, where they've tried everything else and nothing has worked. And I want to invite you to share a little bit about what you do at Causenta Wellness. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, you are.
Causenta Wellness. I want to invite you to share, because I'm imagining that you bring people in from all over the country. And I know that there is also a Mayo Clinic there too. There's a huge medical community in Scottsdale. And then you have this alternative wellness center that is providing a pathway to healing. I know you have a gym in your wellness center, which is amazing. You might have nutrition, you might have other things. What services are you providing on the leading edge at this wellness center for people who come in?
So first, Arizona is a really nice area in that all your major cancer treatment centers are located here. And part of that is year-round weather, so it's accommodating for a lot of different health conditions where it's not like you have to deal with extreme cold that are a little bit harder on some people. Some people complain, it's a little hot, but then you stay indoors. Like you don't really feel the heat when you're inside. So that's kind of not a big deal. What I did years ago is I studied the business models of Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, MD Anderson, Sloan Kettering, all these different places. And what I saw, most of their revenue was coming from surgeries and from drugs, basically. They did not acknowledge exercise and nutrition as very useful. And I felt the overall competency in those areas there was nothing there. It was mostly negligent. And keep in mind, I do come from an exercise background. So we look at movement as the basis for all therapy. If you're not moving, you're dying. Every cell in our body, if it was isolated, it moves. It doesn't sit there and go and paralyze. It moves around. And so what we see is that we're telling people to say, do like exercise right, eat better, that kind of stuff. And yet we don't really give them the details to teach them. Let's say at the big level, say at your what they call center of excellence level. That's your Mayo Clinic, your Cleveland Clinic, et cetera. So what we focused on is, okay, one, how do I measure things in you so I could actually know if something works? One glaring weakness of most large centers is they don't want you to know what works or doesn't work, because you would say after one treatment, let's stop it. You wouldn't do it for years. The business model is to keep people doing stuff for years because it's more revenue over the lifetime of that patient. My goal is to say, I want to do something. I want to test you. I want to then evaluate a treatment. And right now I want to tell you, hey, this worked for you. We're going to keep doing this. And here's why. I could explain it to you. As opposed to, hey, let's do this for 6 months and see what happens. That's healthcare right now. So what I've done is I've brought in technologies from around the world. I have colleagues from pretty much every country you could think of. We have patients come from around the world. Our cases are generally people that do not respond to whatever therapy. In every case, they went to a very good doctor based on skill. They went to a doctor that really knows how to perform a certain task, execute it very well. What the patient didn't consider is that doctor only does that one thing. And so let's just say, like, if you had a car and that car gets into a complete wreck, there's all this damage, you're going to need more than someone to come by and fix a flat tire, right? You just can't ignore the rest of the damage. Well, that's obvious because you could see it. Many people with health issues, they have multiple things going on inside their body. They have low micronutrients. They have a sleep issue. They got all kinds of junk in their head left over from their childhood that they still haven't processed out, which is stored in their cells somewhere. They got maybe molds or mycotoxins traveling around their body. They got a dysfunctional microbiome. So they got all this stuff, and they're not moving as well, and they're eating junk food, like all these things at one time. And they go see a doctor that's going to do one thing. That's the equivalent of the guy fixing the flat tire on a car that's a total wreckage. So it doesn't work. And because they've had that sort of approach, what they get conditioned to think is nothing works and there's no value on spending money on my body or my health. And so that's not what we wanted to do here. What I did here is I said, all right, when you walk through the door, I'm going to give you a tour of the facility. And the first thing I see is no one wears a lab coat. No, you won't know a doctor from a patient here because everyone is smiling and happy. Most docs go by their first name. Like usually people call me Dr. Tom, mostly because they say my last name sounds like a dinosaur. And so, and I usually kind of struggle with that. And then most of the doctors here, it's like Dr. Matt, Dr. Christie, that kind of thing. But we have a team of very bright professionals that are well accomplished in their area, their niche. And we get patients exposed to seeing things in a way they have never seen before. So some recent accomplishments, we had someone with Parkinson's, we were able to stop his tremors in one day. We've had people with brain tumors that couldn't walk, that we are walking in 90 minutes or less. We have a number of patients now, wheelchairs are now walking. Mostly, I think what drives that is my own experience. I was one of the strongest athletes in the country, if not the world, got injured, and then I couldn't walk. And the last thing, what I remember feeling was how trapped and imprisoned I felt being confined when I was just, moments earlier, I was doing whatever I wanted physically, and now I couldn't do anything with my lower body pretty much. And so that drives a lot of the stuff here, and that we have sort of that win at all costs mindset because of my athletic background. I'm not looking to compete for second place, and I don't expect my patients to just settle. I expect them to have really high goals, and then let's see how we could surpass those goals. And we do that by using competency and science and technology, and then a lot of movement. When people come here, every single person goes, I've never seen anything like this before. So as an example, companies send me their technologies from around the world for free. I evaluate their technology and teach them how to make it better. When I say better, I don't mean on the engineering side, how to design it more efficiently. I mean better in that we actually draw blood from people and we measure the effects of their light therapy, their magnetic field therapy, their ozone therapy, their sound wave therapy, their electrical therapy, whatever type of energy system it is. We measure how does that change hormones or cytokines or some other marker, inflammatory markers in the human body. So I've done things like I've put a catheter in my arm and drew my blood every 10 minutes for 4 hours to see change over time from different treatments. And that's how we're able to tell people, okay, now that I know what's in your blood, like what's in your body, what's the best tool for you? Because we have precise measurements of the individual and we know how the machines affect those different things. And then we give people options here they don't get anywhere else. One is that some people want to see what's happening inside. They want to know if something's working. So we give you the option, hey, we could draw your blood before and after, and we can measure this stuff for you. You're going to pay for it. It's not covered by insurance, but you have that right to do so. Most people didn't even know they have that right. Most people go somewhere and there's no monitoring of any kind during the therapy. And they go, how come no one's checking anything? Well, the reason is insurance doesn't cover it because it's not considered essential, medically necessary. And so you don't even give in that chance. Like, what if it's $10? You might be like, yeah, I want to know what's set for $10. I'll do it. What if it's $10,000? And you might say, I'll hold off on this one. But you have that right to say no. And most people don't even get that option to say no. And so we give people lots of options here. And we do some really cool things as far as our background in dietary supplements is way beyond any place else I've ever seen. I don't know that many centers that could show we have people coming in that are too weak to stand and they have cancer all over their body. And in about 6 weeks or less, there's no evidence of cancer and they've gained 20 to 40 pounds. Mm-hmm. So these are the kinds of things that most people don't realize, that if you're losing muscle during cancer treatment, something's wrong. They never think about that. They just hear, well, it's the stress of the chemo and radiation. And then I would say, well, what did you do to counter that? Those are well-defined, well-established outcomes or symptoms of chemotherapy, radiation. What was done to make sure it doesn't happen to you? And most people say, no one's even discussed that with me. So we get labeled a lot of times that you see a lot of athletes, a lot of cancer stuff here. And the reason is when you help a regular person, nobody knows who they are. But you help an athlete with a famous name, it was like, oh, look who's there, you know. So it's not like we only work with athletes. We work with human beings. And then in terms of diseases, we work with a lot of different conditions, but cancer is one that brings the greatest fear for many people. And something I just want to insert here. When I was, let's say, when I was about 8, I can remember at a young age, most people didn't know what cancer was. They just never heard of the word. And if you did hear of it, it was very rare. Then by the time I was, let's say, in my 20s, I remember hearing that, yeah, everybody kind of knew about cancer versus today, everyone has either had cancer themselves or someone close to them has died of cancer. So we have seen, you know, just this incredible explosion of cancer. And when you look at the actual patient experiences and people sharing their stories, it doesn't match up to what you see, like with the message that's put out is we're winning the war on cancer. I think that's totally not true at all. What I see is we're diagnosing people earlier and we're catching more people at stage 1, maybe, you know, stage 2. The thing is, at that level, a lot of treatments work. So like if you look at the treatment success rates at an early stage, it's 100% for a lot of things. When you start getting to 3, when you start getting to 4, what you basically see is most things do not work.
Mm-hmm.
The overall flaw is that when you go into a center and they already have a treatment plan for you before they know your last name, hopefully you got enough common sense to know that's not right. Where I have irrefutable scientific evidence that establishes why every human being is unique. So you are so unique right now. You're not just 1 out of 7 or 8 billion people on planet Earth. You're 1 out of 50 or 60 billion in history. There's no one else like you like that. So how could a drug come by and possibly do the right thing to help you? Like, it's a flawed approach, but that's what drives that's a global medical model, is developing drugs. And what people aren't seeing is that, well, there's a place for them. It's now become the primary weapon, and it's overshadowed more basic things that are more essential to life. Drugs, generally speaking, are not essential to life. Movement is. So our message to everyone should be, here's how to move better. Here's how to move in a way that frees your mind so you're not imprisoned imprisoning yourself on the inside. We're not teaching that type of stuff to kids in school. We're not teaching that to adults in any medical center. Here, every patient has a strength coach. How are we going to help you get stronger unless we have an expert that knows how to get you stronger? I've never seen a center anywhere in the world that has that for their patients.
Yeah, I love all that you shared. And I really hear this strong messaging of like, what, in my own words, what I see is like you're helping people to build a foundation to strengthen their own body. And just like, you know, the drug treatment is really kind of a one size fits all approach where we're just sort of like putting a Band-Aid on the symptom, whereas you're taking some steps back and saying like, let's look at the whole person. And you're talking about, you know, we have the physical body, and I know that you do a lot of mindset work, and we know that there's emotional trauma that is stored in the body on a cellular level. You have a PhD in physiology, you know this. I love the book Waking the Tiger, Dr. Peter Levine, and his work. And I've had my own personal experience, and although I'm not trained in it, I know from my own personal experience that trauma is stored on a cellular level in the body. And what the mind can't remember consciously, sometimes the body does subconsciously through that trauma. And there's just so many layers. And I agree that cancer seems to be like the word where people will sort of stop in their tracks and listen. They'll be like, oh, I can prevent cancer this way. Okay, now I'm going to listen. And for whatever reason, that seems to be, you know, the fear around it is so elevated right now. And that we are really good at treating it in this country traditionally, that, you know, there are other layers to cancer than just the physical component of it. So yeah, I love that you shared all of that. And what I want to ask from you, based on the people that you've seen that have come through the clinic, is what do you find overall, or what do you believe based on the people that have come through in your own life experience is is the underlying maybe root cause for most, just statistically speaking, that keeps most people from achieving what they want in their health journey or their process? What would you say that one thing that's holding people back based on what you see is keeping people from achieving the results?
Well, I would probably say a visual bias effect. So a visual bias effect is something like, you know how you say, when I see it, I'll believe it. And so think of this. You're on a website and you're looking at, I don't know, think of something you might do casually, like, I don't know, look for a new pair of sneakers or something. So, you look on this website and let's say you see this brand A of sneakers. And now you go to another website and all of a sudden you see an ad for that brand A of sneakers. And then you go to a different website, you see that ad. So what marketers know, what the guys in Google and Facebook and all these different giant companies that use artificial intelligence platforms, what they understand about human behavior is the eyes go to a lot of real estate in the brain. So a lot of your brain is dedicated to the input from coming through the eyes. So as you see something, first time like, I don't know, but as you keep seeing it, now the brain starts to recognize that signal, that image, that information coming through the eyes. And now it starts to get recognized as safe or some other word that might resonate well with you. And now it starts to become credible. And so a good example might be, and this is not through the eyes, but most people can relate to this, is you hear a song. First time you hear a song, this song ain't that good. Now it's playing over and over again. Next thing you know, you're snapping your fingers and tapping your feet to the same song you didn't like. And that's an example of what I would call auditory bias or something. But you keep hearing it, and now all of a sudden you start to like it. So when you keep seeing something, you start to like it because your brain recognizes it as familiar, if you will. And so what happens many times is people don't have the awareness of the right questions to ask. So, for example, we know every human being is unique. There's not really many people that would argue against that. Now, how unique we are, there might be some controversy, like, we don't have any humans yet that can live without oxygen. We don't have people that can live without water, right? There are basic things you're not going to be able to get around. But there's quite a bit of difference in how much of certain vitamins and minerals we all need. Some people need a lot more than others. And then if you take those same people and put them in different environments, a hot, humid environment versus a dry, hot environment, you could change sweat rates and loss of different nutrients based on the environment. So, despite all these differences in people, what's always promoted is the same one thing for everybody. And the reason is that's how you scale a business, right? So you look at all the business experts and they'll talk about scalability and, well, you have to then convince everybody they need what you have. Mm-hmm. And so you get intelligent people and you basically use visual bias to convince them they need the one thing. And it's kind of like this. Imagine if I said right now, I want every listener to go put oil in their car. Most listeners say, wait a minute, I can measure my oil level and see I don't need oil. So even though car engines do need oil, at least the gas kind, right, or the kind that has combustible engines, I may not need oil right now. But now think about how many times people see an ad for clothing or supplements or exercise equipment or a drug or whatever it is, fill in the blank. Now they're thinking, I need that. So it's the same thing like oil for your car engine. Yeah, maybe it might be helpful, but it may not be required at that instant or that moment. And it's that little detail that most people don't ever consider. Mm-hmm. And I want to relate this. This is an actual conversation. So I have anywhere from 100 to 200 families I talk to every week. I talk to a lot of people from all over the world. We see right now a lot of people coming from United Kingdom and Canada because they're very frustrated with socialized medicine. You hear, like, in our country, we hear about, in their country, everything's paid for. That's true, but what you don't hear about is they wait forever to get treatment. They're not, and when the treatment's done, it's done in a really, let's say, less than enthusiastic fashion. It's not done with the attention to detail, like, I'm going to find this problem. So I have people coming here from Canada that have had maybe 40 to 60 treatments of something that doesn't work. what would you call that? Imagine if any person from any country in the world comes to you and says, hey, look, they did something. It didn't work once and did it another 59 times. You would say that's barbaric or cruel. That is definitely not competency. And that's what I hear a lot from patients around the world in socialized medicine. So that's definitely not the answer. I can tell you that based on what I'm seeing. But as far as how do we, get to helping people make decisions that could save their lives, I'd like to relate, some recent conversations. So one is I have a man calls me. He calls me because his wife has a terminal breast cancer that spreads, metastasizes around her body. And I said, okay, well, what are you doing for treatment? And he says, I'm giving her noni berry juice. And I said, okay, why are you giving her noni berry juice? He said, because noni berry juice cures cancer. I said, all right, well, how long has she been on noni berry juice? Well, she's been on this for 6 months now. I said, all right, and during that 6 months, what's happened to the cancer? And he says, oh, the cancer is spread. I said, well, what will you do next? And his answer is, I'll give her more noni berry juice. So it never occurred to him that, one, he read about noni berry juice somewhere. There's no study showing that it will actually do this. And even if there was, the study is to give us an idea of something that could work. It's not a guarantee it will work for the individual human being. The study did not incorporate his wife's genetics, right? His wife's microbiome, or his wife is a unique human being, and it was a totally different set of people. But his belief about the noni berry juice was so strong that it never occurred to him it wouldn't work. So his only solution was to give her more of something. So it's clearly not working. Giving her more is not going to be the right answer. And so that's what I hear all the time. So I have to somehow get people from that place that they're at and help them get to a position where they're open to trying things when all they know is failure. Everything they've tried, everything this guy's tried for his wife has failed. So he's not going to be normally. Imagine if you're walking and you hurt your foot. Every time you take a step, you hurt your foot. Do you think you want to go jogging right now? Right? All you learned is pain and suffering. So you were conditioned to not move, right? And I use that as a different example, but there's all these things that are sometimes done in the wrong way. And instead of people say, wait a minute, I got to try to change my approach, they get this fear of resistant to change because it seems like everything doesn't work. So as an example, with all the testing that we do, I could test every gene in the human genome from germline genetics, meaning these are the genes you were born with, so environment had no impact on them yet. I could test every organism, microbiome, any molecule, any substance ever discovered, we could test on every human being. I've never had to do all that on any one human being. So not one person has ever had every test done. And I can tell you that accurately. I've tested over 100,000 people. And yet I hear people all the time go, I've had every test done. And so I said, well, I don't think that's possible. And they'll go, how do you know? You don't know me. You just met me. I go, well, you're still alive. And if every test was done, there would be nothing left of you. So we don't think you could have had it done because there wouldn't be enough biomass left over. But there's a lot of things like most people don't know that most of our biomass is not human cells. It's other organisms like bacteria, fungi, things like that. Yeah. This whole idea of like you are what you eat, you are what you think. It's not really scientifically founded.
It's like entry level.
Yeah. Because let's say you make one change and influences your microbiome. That's the difference between you getting out of bed and wanting to kick ass and take names today versus you laying in bed and not wanting to be bothered by anyone. One change. And yet most people don't think of that stuff. And so, we got all this data, all this awareness. And so when we have conversations with people, we have to first see where they're at. Where's their resistance? Where's their fear? Because an example would be recently a woman said, I don't want to get a biopsy. She has a giant tumor on her chest. Does not want to get a biopsy. I said, okay, why don't you want to get a biopsy of this tumor? And her reasoning was, well, it'll spread to cancer. Mm-hmm. That's one perspective, but what you're not seeing is it's already spreading. Yeah. So you're saying, I don't want to do something, but it's already happening anyway. And what I'm saying is, well, maybe if we can identify what's there, we could kill it faster. Like there's another aspect to it she hadn't considered. So she wanted to think about it, and now it's too large that no doctor will do a biopsy. So now she's not going to get treated, and she'll wind up passing away. So my point about that is instead of using fear to motivate herself to take action, she used fear to trap herself so nothing was done.
Yeah, and thank you for. I mean, that's another golden nugget of wisdom. I wanted to stop and ask you the question as you were talking. So, what is the layer underneath? You know, for example, the man who just kept providing the noni juice, right? I wanted to say, well, so what do you think is the layer underneath? And then you answered the question. Well, I'm going to ask you, but I mean, I'm hearing a lot of resistance and fear. But what? So, if you were to say, like, there is this, the discernment is very important in all of this, and that is what a doctor helps to do in your wellness center, it sounds like, because it is overwhelming.
Yeah.
And people in that position who are dealing with a health crisis, they don't believe that they have time to deal with the overwhelm. All
Sure.
they want is a treatment right now, and they
Mm.
want to be shown that it's going to work. They want to be, and a lot of people do like the foundation of science-based evidence. They do like to see their test results, that whether, and I see this even with the people I work with, whether it changes anything or not physiologically, some people just like to know, they just want an answer. They just want
Mhm.
to know where they are and where they're going to be. So what would you say is the underlying belief to, because there's a deeper layer to it, and I unless it's something other than fear, because we as humans, we do have many of us have a basic need to feel safe. And
Mhm.
what I feel that is possible is that when people come into this situation, maybe perhaps they don't feel safe and they don't know what to trust, so they latch on to one thing that they think is going to work based on their previous experiences or based on a belief that they have. Do you think that there's anything deeper than fear that keeps people where they think is safe and keeps them having those actions of resistance to trying something new? Is there a layer deeper than that? Or do you see that that a lot of it is just fear of the not knowing?
So, well, I'll say it's, I would say, I think there's a lot that is going on. When I've been involved in dissecting, human beings. They were no longer alive when we did that, and there's not a clear guideline between mind, body, and spirit, right? And so, you ever meet someone and for whatever reason you're smiling when you see them, and in other people you're like, maybe you're not looking to engage with them as readily. And then, so what do you want to say? People have good energy, negative energy, bad energy, whatever you want to say. Somehow we draw ourselves to each other, and somehow we repel ourselves. For So what is, how deep do things go? How well do these things surface? I think that's a whole other maybe conversation. I have some unique thoughts about it that really take into physics and biophysics and biochemistry, but it maybe go way off on a deep end that maybe people aren't ready for. But what I will say is this, that anytime someone has a terminal diagnosis, it's very overwhelming. Anytime someone has a career or life-changing injury, that's overwhelming, because you're basically going from, the journey you were on, and you got pushed off that journey onto another journey that you weren't expecting. That's probably the only journey you were intended to go on, but you just didn't know it. You thought you're going left, and now you're going right. So it derails you a bit, and it forces you to reevaluate, things. Like everyone that I've ever encountered, I watch. I watch all these people focus on trying to make money. Now they get sick, and then as they're as their health is going downhill, they then start realizing, well, if I don't make it, what is important to me? And almost always what's important to me is the relationships they had with other people. It's never, hey, can I make more money? It's
Yeah.
never, I get stronger, faster. It's about connecting with the people around them. And maybe they regret a lot of things they've done. I've seen, when people are in pain, it changes their behavior. Like it hurts to move, it hurts to do things. And then oftentimes you take it out on the loved ones around you. So, not like, for example, be a guy that has back pain and he's yelling at his wife. And I've seen cancer metastasize, vertebrae, people's bones in their spine, in their neck, and their lower back. And those people get angry because their nervous system is constantly being attacked by signals of pain. So it's hard to be, jolly and jovial and fun and all that because you're really struggling just to keep it together. And so I've watched guys take it on their wives, and as things get closer, they really regret, honey, I'm sorry I was so angry with you. It was not you, it was just me, and stuff like that. And as I see a lot of this stuff happen, one thing that I wish is that people take action sooner. I can't tell you how many people go to this really weird journey where everyone knows you cannot feel cancer growing. Because if you could, as soon as you had 5 cancer cells, you'd be like, kill those puppies off. I don't want anything left in my body, Mm-hmm. But everybody gets to a point, especially like pancreatic cancer, lung cancer, it could be stage 4 and before you finally see a symptom. So there's not really an internal barometer. We don't have that laser precision to go, oh, I got, pancreatic cancer. We have to get a lot of diagnostic testing before we kind of know what's going on inside of our bodies with certain diseases. Yet despite that knowledge, once someone has a diagnosis, they fall back on, well, I feel fine. I don't have pain. But you already established that how you feel was not precise enough to help you evaluate your health. Yet that's what you're going off of going forward. And so what happens then is they make a lot of poor choices that in the end will not really help them. And a common one I've seen people do is instead of looking at it, how am I going to fight to live? Yeah. They look at it, well, I want to do this before I die. And that do this actually helps them die faster. So a good example is because of where we are located geographically, a lot of people that come here will say, oh, I want to see the Grand Canyon. I want to go to some place higher up. So in other words, altitude. And they totally lose sight of the fact that altitude is a very, very difficult challenge to the body, even when you're healthy. Mm-hmm. If you ask me as a physiologist, do I think someone with a terminal illness should go to altitude? Heck no.
They should go to an oxygen chamber, right?
Right, exactly, the opposite end.
Yeah.
Many people say, well, if I'm going to die, I want to see this or want to experience this thing. And what they're not realizing is, yeah, it sounds very cool to see this site you haven't seen before, but the consequence of that, the threat of that to your health is that now you may not be able to recover it from that. And so now you saw the Grand Canyon, but you're so messed up on the inside, you're not going to make it. Had you just waited like 2 months, maybe you could have beat this. Now you could spend your time there,
Well, that's what I was going to say. They're already in the mindset of, if I'm going to die, then right. I'm going to do this. Yeah. And I 100% agree that, this happens in the work that I do, is even just a health and wellness coach, right? For years and years and years, people will say, oh, I need to do this and I need to do this. Once we find ourselves saying, I need to do this or I should do this, just do it. If you know that it's good for you, maybe just do it. And then 3 years later, they come to me with cancer. And once they have cancer, well, then I'm not the person for them to work with. So I agree. And I'm curious, because I think to wrap things up, I'm going to end up wrapping this up where we started. And we didn't dive into this in the initial conversation, but before we started recording, you and I talked about, because of our life experiences, we view our health and wellness as priceless. We're probably on the same page in saying that it's the foundation for everything. It gives us the quality of our life. We know this because we thought we were going to completely lose everything. And something happens to people where they wait. Why do we wait until there's something really large at stake? Why do we wait until we have cancer? And then what are we going to choose in that moment is going to be our path. Are we going to choose to say, well, no, I have this cancer and I'm going to, go hike the Grand Canyon, and if I'm going to die anyways? Or are we going to say, no, I'm going to beat this and overcome it. I'm still going to go compete at Olympic level after blowing out my knee. There's this thing that happens, and it comes through conversations there's a financial mindset around it. And I say that to say that all of the things, when I lost my health, money didn't matter. I would do and for my daughter, money, I would do anything because it was priceless. And that meant I didn't use my healthcare insurance. That's what it meant. It meant I was willing to explore going to other countries. It meant that I would do what it would take. And if there was something that you could say to somebody in this moment who is, because there's a whole value piece on it, and maybe it goes underneath another layer of self-worth and our beliefs around that. It's deeper than that. What would you say to somebody right now who's listening, who is in a place of feeling like nobody gets them, but they still haven't convinced themselves that they're even willing to go outside of using their insurance? Like they're still not willing to explore things that are outside the box even yet, probably because there's a basic need to feel safe. Maybe what would you say to them right now that could encourage them to maybe shift their perception?
Yeah, so one is to repackage how they view their health. Most people view their health as an expense, not an asset. So, for example, we know that if I said to you, hey, how much do you make a year? And let's just say for simple math, you do 100,000 a year. Then what I would say is, okay, what if you could do that 10 more years? That's $1 million, right? So what if you were to do something now that would allow you to get another 10 years, right? Like that would be a no-brainer, 10 years. But so it's simple math. Everybody goes, oh, heck yeah, right? Now, what would you spend? Let's say if someone said, hey, here's some stock. I want you to put, $10,000 into it, and you're going to quadruple your money in X amount of years. You do that all day long. But now when it comes to someone spending 10 grand on their health, most people are like, oh my God, it's so much money. And part of that reason is in an insurance-based model, we eliminate accountability. So in 2012, Mayo Clinic published a paper that said the current model cannot sustain itself, meaning small insurance for someone. So insurance does not look at you from an optimal biology perspective and say what's in the best interest of you. Insurance is all about cash flow in and cash flow out. So what happens then is people go through this journey where they're in a model where they spend 8 to 15 minutes with a doctor who doesn't even know who they are. They get a prescription for a drug or they get scheduled for surgery. Those are the only two outcomes usually in that kind of world. In the end, they're not happy with the results. So what their condition is that medicine or healthcare doesn't work. So now if you had an experience where nothing works, and now you come to me and I go, hey, this is going to take $68,000 to solve this problem, you're like, why would I ever pay that much money? Because your experience to date was that nothing works, right? And no one wants to be a fool and throw good money after something that doesn't work, right? As opposed to if you would say, well, wait a minute, the approach before was I hardly saw the doctor. They didn't know what was going on inside of me. And that's why it didn't work. And here these guys are going to do whatever it takes to get me to where I want to be. So this is an investment in my health. So it's a different, people just have to look at it from a different perspective. But then there's going to be some trust. The mistake many people make is they ask about treatment success rates. We're all unique human beings. So why would you want to make yourself a number? You already went through that. You already went to a clinic that spent 8 to 15 minutes and you're a number. You're like on a factory to go in and out. So like if I said to you, hey, I just went to Las Vegas and I won money. Do you now jump on a plane and go to Las Vegas from Florida? Hopefully not, because you realize the likelihood of you making money is pretty low. Plus you see the reason why they build all those giant casinos in Vegas is because they're making money. The more money's coming in than going out. That's a fact. Yet what does everybody do? They go to Vegas. Now I want you to think about this in healthcare. Why are they building all these giant centers? Because they make a lot of money. And now what do those centers mostly do? How do you have a multi-billion-dollar center that's only seeing thousands of people? Mathematically, where's all this money coming from? It's coming from insurance paying 6 or 7 figures per case. So anyone that takes the time to look at the numbers knows this doesn't make any sense at all. So when you come, an example would be like radiation. If you were told, hey, this is $30,000 and you have to pay it out of your pocket, no one else is going to pay for it. You're paying for it. And it's going to burn you like crazy afterwards. And you may have a risk for cancer. You might say, you know what, let me try doing this exercise program first we're paying a trainer 150 an hour or so. Well, let me try this dietary supplement or this vitamin mineral testing because it's dramatically less expensive. What happens right now is people told your insurance covers it. They don't get a bill up front. They get a bill much later that they're not expecting. And then when they go someplace here, it says, well, we'll take money from anybody. We don't tell your insurance they can't pay us. Your insurance says they won't cover it. That's the loop that people don't see. And so now when they come here and they pay for something, they're like, well, this seems expensive. Well, only because you don't really know the value of what you're getting, right? If you knew that, hey, I'm going to spend all this money at a hospital and still have the disease and be worse off, you would never go that journey. But most people will have to find out for themselves and get into a place where they cost themselves a lot of money. We see on average half the people that come here initially for a free consult, by the way, we charge nothing up front to talk to them. Those people say, oh, I'm going to go somewhere else. And they go somewhere else, and they're usually within 6 months, well, I'd say 2 months to 2 years, during a time range. They come back and they go, look, I'm worse than ever. When I saw you the first time, I had one diagnosis. Now I have 87.
Wow.
And I'm like, well, we could still help you, but now you've just added a lot of zeros to that. If you thought it was expensive before, you just made all the wrong choices, and look where you're at now. And part of it is they just didn't get it. So they had to learn the hard way that you could have fixed this for $3,000, but now you're going to pay $300,000 because of all the things in between that happened that you didn't consider would damage you.
Yeah. And, I realized as you were talking, there's a piece of it in our belief system almost where using insurance, and this conversation is not about that, but I just realized how it ties in with the mindset. When we go through that process, we sort of let go of our self-responsibility. You know what I mean? We know what we pay, but there's a lot in other words, what I'm saying is when we know that we're paying for something out of pocket and we're investing in something, we're going to probably be more diligent in making sure it's the right decision. Right. Whereas sometimes there's this space of losing I'm talking about self-responsibility on myself, the energy behind the decision making is that we want to trust the system. We want to trust the insurance and the doctor and all that. And we just want to do what's easy because in reality, going outside the box and doing the research and trusting and of course, more people resist it. It brings up a lot of stuff. It's not the easier path to travel most of the time, but the results are a big payoff. I asked a question recently in my community group. If you had $10,000 and you knew that you could go on an amazing vacation where you could have life-changing, sustainable wealth and wellness, what would you choose? Half the people said the vacation, half the people said life-changing health and wellness. Most of the people who chose life-changing health and wellness already had health challenges, so they knew the value of it. And my response is, if you choose the $10,000 for sustainable, life-changing health and wellness, you get to have more vacations. So, let's look at the big picture. Sure. And it's really just shifting the thought process of looking at the big picture. So I love the work that you're doing. And I love that I so appreciate that you came on here to share what you're doing. I think it's really important. I know I live in Florida, but you said you take people from all over the world. And I think it's important. This podcast is about sharing opportunities that are out there because you can't change something if you don't know. And one of the responses I get from people is, so in that conversation of $10,000 for sustainable health and wellness or vacation, the response that I got when I asked individuals is they said, well, what if it doesn't work? And my response is, but what if it does?
Yeah.
But what if it does?
Yeah. Well, I got trapped kind of in that cycle years ago after I got done competing, my joints, I went about a lot of pain in all my joints. And at the time, all my coaches would say I was just tight. I was too young for them to think I had arthritis. And later on, I did some MRIs and I found out I had arthritis in both knees, throughout my spine, both hips, both shoulders, and my right elbow. And this was osteoarthritis. It wasn't rheumatoid like an autoimmune condition. This arthritis was just mostly a consequence of I compete in 5 sports. I was competing, at a very high level every weekend. I was just really pushing and abusing my body, but it didn't hurt. So I had no feedback to say, hey, you're damaging yourself. Or did that for about 30 years. So at the end of those 30 years, I was pretty jacked up, like orthopedically speaking. And so I started trying different things. And at first, nothing seemed to work. And I started going down this mindset where I'm like, I'm spending all this money and not getting results. And when I realized, well, if I keep thinking that way, I'm going to paralyze myself from moving forward. So I then changed it or reframed it to, because I'm valuable, I'm investing in myself to find the truth. And it's my truth. I can't say if I do something for my shoulder and it works, I can't guarantee it'll work for your shoulder. But what I can say is, look, I spent millions of dollars on my body. These are things I tried that didn't help me. And here's what I found that did help me. I could save you from wasting a lot of time and money if you just listen. But if you don't, you want to find out for yourself, that's the freedom we'll enjoy here in the United States. So, and people could, do what they want. Most of my buddies, they know that I'm very aggressive in my pursuit of things. And so, so from last year till now, we have 10 times more things going on here than we ever have in history. We have technologies coming daily from all over the world. We have new doctors joining our practice every week. I mean, there's a lot, new patient cases. We're doing stuff now I don't know anyone else that's doing with exosomes and stem cells and just testing. We're in a few places when you walk through the door, we have labs we have that lab perform every single test they offer. Yeah. So limited amount of blood. We test everything you can, every infection, every microorganism, every vitamin, mineral, every hormone, anything you could think of, we run a test for. We test for a lot of markers in people's brain because a lot of people have brain damage. They just don't know it because they don't have any symptoms. And so we're able then to make really precise recommendations. Like, for example, from our full genetics panel, we've uncovered that many people drink tea. And tea is a trigger for lupus if you have a certain gene mutation. So a health food is basically unhealthy. Just like certain substances, if they get into the body and you have a mutation of a liver enzyme, that healthy substance gets metabolized in a different way that's a threat to your health. And this is where you hear things like resveratrol is good for you, well, not for everyone. Right. Certain health foods may not be healthy for a given individual. And so we can now make these modifications to someone's diet or nutrition regimen that can totally help them get better.
Yes, I think that is so important, is understanding the treatment of the individual. And sometimes it means that healthy food isn't healthy for you. I think there's that is such again, another nugget of wisdom for the listeners, and understanding the value of investing in their self, because they are worth it. You were worth it. I was worth it. They're worth it. And to not wait, to know that the sooner that you choose to take action, the more possibilities, can happen easier. So thank you so much for your time today. I know you need to get back to work. You're a very busy man, and you've got tons of doctors in your clinic. You have a gym. It sounds like a wonderful place. And I'd love to visit when I come back to Arizona.
You should. Please do.
Yeah. So can you just share with me, please, the website? Yep. And I'll share it in the show notes for the Wellness Center.
It's www.causenta.com, and that's CAUSENTA.com. And all people have to do is just go to the website, and we have a form they could fill out, and they can schedule a free consult.
And can they do a consult over the phone?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
Most people, it's done by phone first. What's a little different about the way we do things is my expectation is before you come here, we know what to do for you. I don't want you coming in here waiting and we go like, oh, we don't know what to do. I want you to come in and be like, hey, here's what we have planned for you and here's the reason why. And then it flows much better. So usually a phone consult that's free, then just to kind of say, hey, yeah, we could help you and here's how. And after that, people do a paid phone consult. And then we get a plan. That plan could be we test them where they live. We ship out stuff to them and they come in to go over the lab results and do some stuff. Or if it's something more immediate, they could just fly in and we can set everything up the same day. And we can be as conservative or as aggressive as people want to be. I've really had people, spend over six figures to get stuff done right away. I've had other people spend, just a couple $100 because they want to move a little bit more in stages. So our model is it's not a one size fits all. It's not off the shelf medicine. It's very variable. And we ask people, will this work for you? And I don't mean just financially. What about time? What about travel commitments? What about other obligations? Lots of people, beginning of the year, everybody goes on this whole what do they call it? Resolution, what are you going to get in healthy, get shape and all that. And then most people don't realize, but if you don't change your life, all the goals in the world don't actually work out because if you don't plan to work out. So like a lot of people say, I'm going to work out at night, but they're tired at the end of their day. So they're choosing to work out where they never have energy. And instead of saying, well, why don't you just go to bed a little earlier, wake up a little earlier, work out in the morning, and that way when you have the most energy, so it's easier to do, there's simple adjustments that could be made.
So I love how you shared just like your practice and how you help people is very holistic. You also take a holistic approach in your services, which I think is feels really good on the end of the customer to walk in and to know that they're being supported based on their lifestyle and what's available to them. Because I think that's an important part of it too. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for your time. I'm so grateful. And I'm going to share all of your information in the show notes and where people can find you. And thank you for doing the work that you're doing in the world. I'm just so grateful for, all of the work and time and commitment and your story and your journey that has gone into creating this amazing wellness center for people to come to from all over the world. So Dr. Tom, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jen. And by the way, I really love that color blue on you.
This is my new color. It's my new. I live in the world of energy, and so this is the one I'm moving into. So thank you for noticing.
It looks good. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye.